Shekhar here. Confessions of a Single Guy. I'm doing something different this time. I was told to do a YouTube video version of this, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Talk a little bit about. I think I'm going to talk about excuses versus reasons. Um, and I think they're really important because what I found, what I continue to find in the relationships that I have, in the just approach that I take, is, we do things wrong. I've talked about intent. Um, but I think, one of the things that's really misunderstood is like we we tend to justify why we do what we do. And I've talked about it, like I said, I think I've talked about how it's really important to think about intent. Like, why did they do it? So that's what's important on your side when you feel like you've been wronged. The question just is, overall, like, what are excuses and what are reasons? And does it really matter? I guess is what I've been trying to figure out and think through. And I don't have a great answer on this because this is one of those things where I struggle to really understand whether anyone truly cares in this world about whether someone did something wrong and whether them doing something wrong and having an explanation for it is going to be accepted. So I think for the most part, we live in a world where outcomes now are really all that matters. We're so quick to judge. We judge everything. We judge it quickly. We don't care necessarily what the reasons are. And that's why people get eviscerated on social media when they make a mistake. Because we're focused on what they said. Not why they said it, not when they said it, not where they said it. It's just what they said. And it's crazy because, to approach the world that way, to approach relationships that way, just kind of misses the point. If tomorrow we all went to Disneyland and all that matters is that we went to Disneyland, I don't think we would. I think everybody would sit there and be like, well, you guys went to Disneyland, parents took the kids to Disneyland, it's an amazing experience, they're great. Well, not necessarily. Like, did you go on the rides? Did you have fun? Were you happy the whole time? Were you guys making memories? Were you miserable? Nobody really thinks about that these days. Nobody tries to think about, like, what is the underlying driver of it. And I guess what I'm trying to get a better sense of is when we think about excuses and we think about reasons, what is important to people? Like, what matters? Because at the end of the day, like, if you want to live in a world where you write someone off as soon as they make a mistake, that's fine. You can certainly do that. But if you decide to do that, then you're going to start limiting your pool of friends. Your network starts closing in. It's a certainty. You will not be able to build a repository of relationships, of people in your life, if you're constantly writing them off once they do something wrong, because everyone's going to do something wrong to you. So the question to me is, how do you filter? Because obviously there are some things that people are going to do wrong that you cannot get away from, and people are going to give you their reasons for why they did it. And a lot of people then sit there and go, well, that's just an excuse. That doesn't matter. And so I'm struggling to understand, like, what is the difference? What do we care about in this world? Do we care about excuses? Or do we care about the explanation if it's always going to be relegated to just these are excuses? And I don't totally understand how society's gotten to that point. Like, to me, like, understanding the character and nature of someone's wrongdoings or someone's activities is almost as important as as forgiveness of it. Forgiving somebody is correlated to why they did something. And I've found that every time recently I do something wrong and I apologize for it, there are two big challenges from the other side. One is I lack sincerity, and the second is it's just an excuse. And maybe the reason is in these situations it's like, well, you've given me enough chances. I have obviously not lived up to what I was supposed to. I haven't delivered on those expectations, and as a result, I kind of have run out of any reasons to explain any of my actions. And so I just wonder if, like, is it, are we okay with reasons early on in a relationship, but then as relationships go forward, we just get tired of giving people, I guess, free passes, and that kind of just ends up creating a situation where, you're just totally screwed. I'm not sure, and I think there's a high level of rationale behind that. I think there's a really good chance that in our lives with people that we're in, you have a certain amount of cards you can play. It's a certain amount of get out of jail free cards, and then at some point you're just kind of done. And I think some of us are more guilty than others of using up those cards. So I guess I think what I think is interesting is reasons early on in a relationship turn into excuses later on in a relationship, and I don't think there's any way around that. Especially if it's the same subjects, the same topics, it's the same sources of tension and frustration. And that's kind of interesting. So, like, basically what I'm saying is relatively straightforward. Just like, if you fuck something up, you can't keep fucking it up. You are not able to, you shouldn't do that. You have to think about the fact that, like, you're not going to, how you approach it the second time or the third time or the fourth time around is not going to have the same output or outcome. And I think that's true, but I also think equally likely is there are situations where just people are incredibly harsh, unforgiving, and don't care. So there's like those situations where there are things that you can do that there's almost no coming back from. And I think if you identify that in a situation, you kind of have to pretty much, I think those relationships, like I said before, are never going to be the same again, and you almost have to just abandon those relationships because there's just no point. You're going to torture yourself. And there's no point in torturing yourself. Life's just too short. Like, again, I know I sound like somebody who's willing to walk away from things very quickly. And to a degree, that's true. I think there's a lot of me that's willing to move past things much more rapidly than others. And I do that because I think that in my business and what I do, I am constantly under the gun and I'm forced to make decisions. And that allows me to, in my business, if you hold on to something like a stock or an investment that's just not working and you're just hoping that it turns around, you're likely putting yourself in a world of hurt. Because likely it's never turning around and you're just, fooling yourself into thinking that. And I think we tend to be somewhat delusional in some of our relationships. I think I've been guilty of that in my past. Delusional. I just didn't think about things the right way. And I didn't appreciate things the right way. And I think, what I think, going back to the things that I've talked about with regards to communication and why communication is such a material driver to healthy relationships, a lot of us don't want to give all of ourselves. We don't want to share everything. And a lot of us have these things that we want to do and the places and things that we want to pursue that we're just not willing to pursue we're just not willing to kind of share or expose. There's a vulnerability in everybody that, we will not allow ourselves to open up stopgaps or potentially like floods of information that will potentially be used against us at some point. Or potentially just embarrass us or make us whatever. And so we tend to conceal those things, and then ultimately they may be living in the land of the gray, or they're not necessarily things that you should share. And then